What are threat agents? Threat agent is simply the actor, which is a human or a software, that initiates an attack. And naming the agent clarifies the defenses we need. In cloud environments, agent can operate from the open internet or within the provider's internal network or from a neighboring tenant in a multi-tenant cluster. Policies and mechanisms aims to block agents at multiple layers, so if they slip past one defense, another one stops them. Think in the terms of agents and layers also helps in incident response. We hunt for which agent we are dealing with and which defense failed. This structured view turns chaos into a checklist. Anonymous attackers are the outsiders with no legitimate access who probe public edges for weak points, often automating scans and credential stuffing attempts because they lack inside knowledge. They favor broad techniques like using leaked password lists, trying default credentials, or exploiting old ones. They also hide their tracks behind VPNs, proxies, or botnets to avoid simple IP blocking. Our countermeasures focus on hardened perimeters, rate limits, MFA, and rapid patching of internet facing services. The goal is to make the quick win attacks unprofitable and noisy enough to detect. Malicious service agent. A malicious service agent sits where normal services live and quietly intercepts or alters traffic, which makes it dangerous and difficult to spot. It can masquerade as a proxy or a helper process, forwarding messages while copying sensitive fields or injecting harmful payloads. Defense relies on mutual authentication. Both sides prove their identity, signed or integrity checked messages, and strict service to service authorization policies. Network segmentation and minimal trust between services ensure that a single compromised component cannot spy on or corrupt anything. In short, we verify not just users but also the software that talks to other software. Trusted attacker and malicious insider. A trusted attacker already have legitimate credentials, perhaps as another tenant in the same cloud or as an employee or a contractor, and they exploit that foothold. Because they start inside trust boundaries, they can spam or overload services while looking like normal traffic. Malicious insiders are especially potent if they hold administrative rights or physical access. We counter with least privilege, separation of duties, mandatory change reviews, and detailed audit trails that make suspicious behavior both detectable and attributable. Rapid deprovisioning and periodic access recertification keeps yesterday's access from being today's breach. Traffic eavesdropping is passive listening, capturing data in transit without altering it so it can run undetected for long periods. End to end encryption, TLS for services, VPN for private links, and careful key management are our primary defenses. We disable weak ciphers and refuse outdated protocol versions to prevent downgrade attacks that force weak encryption. Consider the hospital research example. Encryption ensures that even if someone taps the wire, they read only noise. By making the postcard unreadable, we remove the payoff for listening. Malicious intermediary or man in the middle. A malicious intermediary sits in the communication path and modifies the message, perhaps inserting commands or redirecting sessions to the attacker control endpoints. That breaks both confidentiality and integrity in one move. Proper TLS with certificate validation, certificate pinning in clients, and mutual TLS or else MTLS for service to service calls dramatically reduce this risk. Session management that resists hijacking, which means short tokens, refresh flows, IP device binding where appropriate, adds another layer. The test of success is simple. Even if someone sits in the middle, they cannot impersonate either party. Denial of service, which is very famous. Denial of service, DOS, aims to exhaust a resource, CPU, memory, bandwidth, or connections, so real users are crowded out. DDoS multiplies power by coordinating many attacking hosts. Cloud architectures defend with a mix of rate limiting, auto scaling, traffic scrubbing, and geographically distributed front doors that absorb surges. We also design applications to fail gracefully, shed non essential work, and prioritize critical operations when under stress. Monitoring for early warning, certain spikes, abnormal patterns, lets teams shift from reactive to proactive. Availability is ultimately an engineering property, not just a wish. Insufficient authorization happens when systems grant more access than intended or assume that only nice paths will be used. For example, protecting a database through a web API but leaving the database port open. Weak passwords, shared logins, or long lived tokens make matters worse. We fix this with least privilege, short lived credentials, network level controls, and checks on every path to sensitive data. The rule of thumb: every route to critical resource must authenticate and authorize so there are no side doors. Virtualization and containerization attacks are: virtual machines share a hardware hypervisor and containers share an operating system. So weaknesses in isolation can allow jailbreaks. A hypervisor escape can expose neighboring virtual machines. A compromised host operating system can expose every container on that host. We reduce risk with hardened minimal images, rapid patching of hypervisors, and runtimes. If one workload is compromised, careful isolation turns a disaster into a containable incident. Malware is a software with hostile intent. Viruses replicate, Trojans pose as a helpful tool, spyware and adware watch and monetize. Ransomware logs the data for payment, and bots sit quietly awaiting for remote commands. The most effective defenses are layered: educate users how to avoid risky download and links, restrict what code can execute, patch aggressively, and maintain tested offline backups. When users know the red flags and the system blocks unsigned or unexpected binaries, many attacks fail before they start. Recovery planning matters too. Ransomware is survivable if backups are ready and restoration is practiced. Insider threats can cause harm deliberately, by mistake, or by cutting corners, and each pattern calls for a different response. Background checks, monitoring, and clear sanctions deter malicious behavior. Safer defaults and just in time guidance prevent many accidents. Leadership emphasis and accountability reduce negligence. Remember that insiders can affect physical assets, social media, and data, so protections must span the digital and physical worlds. A culture that rewards reporting and learning from near misses strengthens defenses over time. Social engineering and phishing. Social engineering targets people because persuasive requests can bypass technical controls, urgent emails, fake login pages, or helpful phone calls that get credentials. Phishing scales this deception with convincing message and cloned websites that capture password or push malware. We fight back with awareness training, simple reporting tools, email domain protections, and link file scanning. But the best control is a pause to verify before acting, teaching students and staff the golden rule: trust, but verify, especially when the message is urgent or surprising. Botnets is a network of compromised devices, servers, PC, and even cameras, quietly controlled by an attacker to launch a DDoS attack, send spam, mine cryptocurrency, or spread new malware. Attackers can buy or rent botnets, which lowers the barrier to launching large attacks. To avoid becoming a zombie, keep systems patched, change defaults, restrict outbound connections, and monitor for traffic to unknown command and control domains. At the perimeter, providers use backholding and scrubbing to blend botnet traffic before it reaches applications. Privilege escalation. After breaching a low privilege account, attackers try to climb to admin by exploiting bugs, misconfigurations, or overly broad role mappings. If escalation works, that means they can create backdoors, alter logs, and disable defenses. We counter with timely patching, just in time access that grants admin only when needed, and alerts on unusual privileges, changes, or sensitive API calls. Routine access reviews remove lingering rights that attackers love to find. When escalation fails, damages stays contained. Brute force and remote code execution. Brute force is the blunt instrument of trying many password combinations until one works. Multi-factor authentication or MFA, lockouts and anomaly detection make it inefficient. Remove code execution RCE is more dangerous. It lets an attacker run commands on your machine from theirs, often through input validation, flaws, or unpatched services. Defense emphasizes reducing exposure, least privilege, and network segmentation. Validating and sanitizing inputs, patching rapidly, and watching for oil processes or outbound connections. Treat unexpected execution like a fire alarm. Investigate first, assume the compromise until proven otherwise. SQL injection, tunneling, and APTs, advanced persistent threats. SQL injection hijacks database commands through poorly handled inputs, parameterized queries. Tunneling hides malicious traffic inside legitimate protocols like HTTP or DNS. Slipping past a naive firewall, deep packet inspection, and strict egress policies help catch it. Advanced persistent threats (APTs) are long term multi step campaigns that chain techniques, phishing, privilege escalation, lateral movement over months. Against APTs, we rely on layered defenses, rapid patching, behavioral detection, and strong incident response, accepting that prevention is never perfect. Flawed implementations. Flawed implementations sometimes the danger is not a genius attacker, but a fragile design or misconfiguration that fails under normal use. In shared cloud, one poorly implemented service can crash a host and disrupt neighbors as well, turning a small flaw into a wide outage. We prevent this with code reviews, configuration baselines, robust staging that mirrors production, and resilience testing to expose weaknesses safely. Observability, good logs, metrics, and traces let us catch and fix fragility before it becomes newsworthy. Engineering quality is security by another name. Security policy and disparity. Your organization and cloud provider may follow different security playbooks, and because the provider owns the underlying infrastructure, you won't control everything. Third parties like security brokers or certificate authorities can add yet more policies, creating a patchwork that is hard to reason about. Before moving sensitive workloads, assesses how well the provider's control map to your requirements and where gaps remain. When gaps can be closed, adjust the design or choose a different provider so the policy misalignment doesn't become an incident waiting to happen. Contractors, contracts, and SLAs. Security must be confided in contracts and SLAs. Who is liable for what and how incidents are handled, what uptime is promised, and who owns and accesses the data. These documents decide in advance who does what and when the worst happens, which prevents argument during a crisis. If you required controls conflict with the provider's standard operation, negotiate terms, redesign the architecture, or walk away. The best time to fix ambiguity is before the deployment, not after the breach. Risk management process. Risk management is a continuous loop which assesses what could go wrong, treat the most important risk, and control by monitoring outcomes and adjusting plans. Assessment identifies vulnerabilities and estimates impact. Treatment eliminates, mitigates, transfers, or accepts risk. Controller observes the results and feeds the lesson back to the next cycle. Clouds make this a shared practice. Providers monitor platforms while consumers monitor applications and data. The loop turns one off fixes into an improving security posture over time. Summary and key takeaways. Cloud security works when technology, policy, and people reinforce one another rather than leaving gaps. Knowing the threat landscape can help you detect the right countermeasures, and the CIA triad confidentiality, integrity, and availability keeps priorities aligned with business value. Prevention and preparation are far cheaper than recovery, so invest in basics first, which are identity patching, backups, monitoring, and training. Finally, remember that most powerful controls is an informed user making careful choice at the right moment. And that is all for today's class. See you again tomorrow.